Good afternoon, everyone. I think it's time to get started. Welcome to this webinar. This is the first webinar on in the Support Vaults series. The idea behind this is kind of a new concept for us. The idea behind this is that we get a lot of questions in support that are actually quite interesting, and sometimes it's things that that we know and that we just have to explain over and over again to new people. And sometimes it's things that we don't know and where we have to do some research and figure out how this could be done as well. And I think a lot of these topics are really interesting for a broader audience to show little stuff in pdfToolbox where well, things that are good to know, but that perhaps aren't always that easy to derive from the documentation or from the other material that we have available. So in this Secrets from the Support Vaults series, you'll have a whole bunch of webinars where we highlight these little things. So far, we have about 6 of these planned for the remainder of the year. And then we'll see next year whether this is something that we want to continue or repeat at some point. If there are topics where you think this would be interesting to have someone spend half a webinar about, then please let us know. We're always interested in stuff like that. So this will take between half an hour and an hour. It depends a little bit on how well this works, I guess, and how quick I am. Okay, let's get started here. But what we need to talk about here is page sizes. And very specifically, when you look at the imposition functionality inside of pdfToolbox in the switchboard, you go to the arrange section of the switchboard, you have a whole bunch of stuff that relates to imposition in there. Booklet, up, fill page. Our slice button is of course in there as well, but I'm really talking more about the real imposition stuff now. So the impose action, step and repeat, all of those use page sizes, predefined page sizes. So if I look at fill page, for example, I can select the page size that I want to use. And if the page size that you're interested in is in there, that's very, very nice. But as we'll see, so I'm going to back out of here and do the same thing here and go to fill page. So if the page size that you regularly work with is in here, that's really cool. You don't have to do anything. But in many workflows, there is a desire to also add custom page sizes. I'm not working with A4, but I'm working with something that has a slightly different size. Well, you can customize this. And this is a question we get regularly. There's a little trick in how you can customize this little list that I have here. And the trick involves modifying a text file. How do you find the text file? Well, when you look at the switchboard and you're wondering if there is hidden functionality, so hidden stuff that you can modify in here without there being controls on the tab that you're looking at, it's a good idea to have a look at this action button at the bottom here. If there is typically more advanced functionality inside the switchboard that you can modify, then it is typically contained in this action menu. And that's what you'll find for all of these impose actions. There is something that is called manage sheet sizes. If I run that, so if I click on this thing, it opens up a document called page sizes, and you can see where it lives. It lives in my library, the preferences for pdfToolbox, inside of the repositories. And actually, I'm working with a custom repository. That's the name of this custom repository, and inside of there I have actions, and in there is page sizes. Looks very complex, but you don't really have to know all of that. You simply click on that menu item that you have here, manage sheet sizes, and then it will open this text file for you. Now, what you might want to do is, instead of opening this in the default text editor, I'm actually going to close this because by default I have text edit for .text files, and I am going to open it in something that I like a little better for these types of documents, and that is in my case Sublime, but there's a whole bunch of text editors, of course, that you can work with. Why am I doing this? Well, let me modify the tab size that I have here, the tab width, and you'll see it a little bit better, and I can actually see if I can make that even better. Well, probably that's about the best I'm going to get on this document. So why am I opening it in Sublime? Well, I'm opening it in Sublime because this is a document with a very precise structure. And one of the relatively frequent questions that we get in support is from users who have modified this document, and they made a mistake while they modified it. And the result is that pdfToolbox can no longer read this file because it expects structure and the structure isn't there anymore. And then you'll get a very ugly error as soon as you go to the to any of the functionality in the imposition tab that uses this particular file. So you want to be a little bit careful when you do this. And in case you don't know what I mean by being careful, it would not be a bad idea to make, for example, a copy of that file, so that if you do something wrong, you can go back to that file again afterwards. In case you have already done it wrong and you didn't make a backup, you can either try to fix the file, and I will give you some pointers about that in a second, or what you can also do is in the application itself. So if you go dig deep inside of the Callas pdfToolbox desktop application itself, you will find a copy of that page sizes.txt file, the original if you want. Yeah, and you could copy that one and copy it into the folder that you have here. Another trick to get this is to create a new repository and then do something with imposition in that repository and your library, I mean, actually. So that would create an additional folder inside of this repositories folder, and that folder would get a new pristine copy of that page sizes.txt. So that's another way to find a file again that works. Now, why do you have to be careful? Well, you have to be careful because there is a convention to what is in here. First of all, everything that starts with a pound sign, so every line that you see in here that starts with a pound sign and every line that is blank is ignored. So all of this stuff that you see here, the whole top of this document is all ignored. For pdfToolbox, that's irrelevant. Those are comments, and it will simply ignore them. At the top here, even though this is comments, it is interesting for you potentially, because it will tell you what it expects to see on all of the real lines that have values. Yeah, and there are two sections in here. One section has a comment at the top that is called predefined values do not change. It would be a good idea not to change that, although there might be good reasons to change it after all, and I will tell you in a second what those are. And then you have a second section in here that is called user-defined values, and then you can see one item in here by default, but it has been commented out. Yeah, so this is a good template to start from if you want your own page sizes. Now, these predefined ones have very strange names. You can see that the first thing that we have on a line is kind, and that is either predefined or a user. The second thing we have on the line is name, and all these predefined ones have very strange names. And that's because these names are not shown to you. They are rather looked up in a localization, a translation library, and then localized. While A4 might be called the same in French and English and Dutch, letter is probably not called the same. And many of these file formats well, could have a different name in different languages. And that's why you see such a cryptic name for them. That way they can be looked up in translation libraries, and then, well, you see an actual readable string in the user interface. So that's the first size. We don't need that, of course, if we do something under the custom section. This is only to support localization in pdfToolbox itself. So in our user-defined values, we can simply have whatever name we want to put in there. And we'll add something in a second to show how it is done. But that's the second part. Then the third and the fourth part is the width and the height of the document, the page that you want to add, and then the unit in which you do that, which would be either millimeters or inch. So what do we have here? We have something that will probably be called letter in the user interface, and it says 8.5 width, 11.0 height, and the unit is inch. And then another example, this will be translated to A4, and that is 210 by 297 millimeters. Yeah? So changing this is relatively simple. We just have to keep the same order of fields, and we have to make sure that in between each field, there is a tab, not a space, but a tab. And that's where usually it goes wrong. When I want to add something, and if I would say user space, and now I want this webinar page format, well, this is already going to break pdfToolbox, because instead of having a tab in between, I have a space in between. So you have to make sure that there is, that's actually not what I wanted, and I'm going to, now that I want to do it good, in a good way, I'm going to make my life easier, and I'm going to just copy and paste this, and that's probably what you should do as well. So uncommented, the first field is user, the second field, I can say whatever I want, webinar formats. Now remark that I have a space in my name of the page, but that doesn't matter, I can do that. That's not a problem. pdfToolbox simply looks for the tabs to count how many fields there are on this line, how many pieces of information. In one of those fields, I can have all the spaces I want. So that's absolutely not a problem. And I'm going to make this a very strange page size, perhaps. I'll make this 500 millimeters by 500 millimeters. And now I can save this. And remember that in case I did something wrong here, I made a copy beforehand. I strongly advise you to do the same. And now when I go back to pdfToolbox and I open this pop-up menu, it is not there, which is very disappointing, to be honest. So this is a very, very common thing to remark and be very puzzled about why this is not showing up in this list. Well, that's because the list is only read by pdfToolbox when you open this, this tab. Yeah, so you have to force pdfToolbox to refresh that list. And how do I do that? Well, the easiest way to do it is to go back to the arrange window or to any other pane in the switchboard, to be honest, and then say fill page again, and that forces pdfToolbox to reread that page sizes.txt file and then interpret what is in there, and we have our own format. Yeah. Now, keep in mind also the other thing that might go wrong and why this doesn't show up is because you made your changes here and you did not save them. Yes, believe me, I speak out of experience. This is a very easy mistake to make. So make sure that you do your changes that you want, you save them, and then you can go back here and do the little trick with one step back, one step forward, and it will show up in my list. Now, to finish this, there are two more things I want to do. First of all, we're going to be really stupid. So I'm going to make a second format. We'll call this 400 by 400. And we'll call this, actually, I'm going to call this 1 and this 2. That's just because I can't stand when things are not logical. So we'll put the 400 first and the 500 following. And now, because I was so quick in what I did, I made a little mistake here. And let's see what pdfToolbox does, just so that you know what happens when we break this thing. And what happens is when I click fill page now, I get this argument feature name user webinar format 2 is wrong, unknown feature. Yeah. This sounds like a very strange error message, but actually when you read it, it gives you a very good clue about what is going wrong. So it's worthwhile reading what is in here, and that will probably tell you where you made a mistake. In this case, it says argument feature name, and then user webinar format 2 is wrong. So we did something with this user webinar format 2. It is considering that to be one term, one value that it has to interpret, and it doesn't know that. It only knows predefined and user. So this user webinar format 2, it doesn't know. So we did something wrong, obviously. And we can replace the space that I have with a tab in here. Say, remember, and then when I go back now and we look at our list of page formats, now it shows it correctly. So if you do something wrong, you'll get that error message. That error message means that, well, you basically broke that file, and you're going to get that error message in any piece of functionality here that uses the page sizes.txt document for page size definitions. So step and repeat and impose and fill page and up and booklet and so on. Yeah. So if you get that, remember that that is because you did something wrong. Now, last point here is this document says do not change. And I'm going to be a little bit naughty and tell you that there is a good reason to change it anyway. And that is not so much to change the individual lines. That you should not do. Yeah. But in many circumstances, you are working in a workflow and you know that there are certain page sizes that you're interested in, and there are other page sizes that will only confuse you or your users. Well, it is of course perfectly okay to say, I don't like all of this. We don't use this. I just want this A4, and then I want, so I just want the A formats, for example, and then I want my own custom. Of course, you can delete this template line as well if you want. And now when I go back to fill page, I only have the formats that are really interesting to me. That, of course, is a valid way of doing this. Yeah. Do not modify the individual entries. There is not really a good reason to do so, but you can delete the ones that are not relevant in order to get a list that is customized and small and only has the formats that you want to see in there. Okay, that is what I wanted to cover here. And let me see if there are any questions. Meanwhile, I have a question from Andrea. Hi, Andrea. Custom page size used in the CLI. Well, the way you use custom page sizes in the CLI would actually be through actions. So if we're looking at this, and usually it's not something that you really need. Let me explain that. So if I'm working with fill page and I want to do this in the CLI, then I have a number of options. The first option would be that I create an action in the switchboard. So I select the page size, the custom page size that I want, and then I create a new switchboard action and I say fill page using webinar formats 1. I save that, and that gives me an action that is saved in the switchboard. And if I now go to my profiles window and I say create process plan, and I add an action, I can add that action to my process plan. And of course, the process plan can then be run in the command line version or in the server. So you don't really need to define the custom page sizes in the server version. You would define them in the desktop version and then use them there. Any other questions? I think all other questions have been answered. If you think of any question once this session is over and you start playing with this, that's usually how it happens. Don't hesitate to send us questions. You can either do that to support@4ps.com or drop me an email at david@4ps.com. You can see my email address at the bottom of the slide there. So if you run into something that leaves you with questions, just come back to us and we will be very happy to answer. And then the only thing that I have to do is to thank you for being here with so many. I hope this was useful. And like I said, if you have topics that you would like to see covered in one of these webinars, don't hesitate. We would be very happy to receive them. Just send us a little email. Have a great rest of the day.